Welcome back. This is part 2 of how to make your own exercise program. In part 1, we talked about goal setting and understanding that you're going to need to train specifically to achieve your unique specific goals. Now this is part 2, and we're going to look at the big picture of how to train, generally speaking, how to make sure that you're getting enough challenge, that you get stronger or you get better or more flexible or whatever your goal is, that you get closer to that goal, and that you don't, essentially flounder along without pushing yourself into your outside of your comfort zone, so you never actually make any progress. So in part 1, we talked about goal setting and understanding your unique goals. We discussed the essential components of fitness and how to make sure you get a well-balanced fitness program. We also discussed priorities for general health. We looked at bare minimums and understanding what is the minimum amount of exercise that you can do and still be effective and get benefits to your health. And we looked at, generally speaking, if you want to incorporate all of the primary components of fitness into your fitness program, how can you generally achieve them without making things too complicated? So if you want to learn more about that, please make sure you watch part 1 of this series. But today we're going to talk about assessments and tracking, so you know where you started and you know when you actually make progress. Then we'll talk about progressive overload and phases of training so that you make sure you're on the right track, challenging yourself enough that you get better, but not so much that you get hurt. And then we'll look at some of the general components of a good workout in terms of frequency, intensity, time, and type. And that's going to be the framework that you'll use to actually build each individual workout. In case you didn't already know this, this course is going to be turned into a mini course on my website for all access members. So every topic that we cover in this video will be covered in greater detail alongside case studies. I've incorporated a case study, so we actually get to build a program together in the mini course. And I think that's going to be really a fun learning activity. So check that out. It's probably going to launch in 1 or 2 weeks. The link for the all access membership will be in the description, so you can just check it out there. So first things first, we need to assess and track progress. The first thing was we formed goals. We tried to understand exactly where you're at, what you're trying to achieve with exercise, because there are tons of great reasons to exercise, but your reasons are uniquely your own. Now we need to understand how to track progress. So if we want to track progress, we need to know where we're starting. So if, for example, I want to get strong, then I need to see how heavy of a thing can I pick up, and then I know my baseline. And if I make progress and later I can pick up a heavier thing, then I have successfully trained myself and made improvements. Or how about an example of general health? Maybe somebody is struggling with feeling winded if they walk up a long flight of stairs. Maybe they live on the 4th floor of an apartment and they walk up the stairs each day. Then for that person, maybe their baseline is saying, okay, I have to actually stop and catch my breath on each flight. And I don't like that. I don't feel healthy. So that's my baseline, is 4 flights of stairs, and I'm having to catch my breath on each flight. So that's a measurable baseline. So we know their goal is to not get winded when they walk up their stairs. Their test was, well, the stairs, and they tested and they assessed and realized that they stopped themselves on each flight to catch their breath. Then in order to achieve that goal, we need to train specifically to get better at walking upstairs and have better cardiovascular endurance. So how do you think we'll train? Probably with walking, hiking, running, climbing stairs would be a great thing to do. And we'll see if that improves. And then of course, you're always going to want to reassess and make sure that your training actually made some improvements. So go walk those stairs again and see, am I stopping on each flight, or can I make the whole 4 flights without having to catch my breath? If so, then you know what you were doing actually worked and made improvements. And maybe you get to a point where you can again reassess in another 6 to 8 weeks, and maybe now it's not just the 4 flights, but maybe you can go up and down and then back up again, and you still don't feel winded. If so, then you've made a lot of progress. But you have to know your baseline to know if you've made any progress at all. And then I want to mention tracking as well. So there are lots of free templates or spreadsheets that you can download in which you can track your exercises. You track, if you're weightlifting, you could track how much weight you're lifting, or you could even track, your flexibility and do a baseline test there. If nothing else, you can just grab a pen and paper, grab a little journal, and each time you work out, just write down what you do. And then you'll notice, oh, I was able to do this many sets or this many repetitions, or I was able to exercise for this long, or I could run half a mile before I got tired, or whatever it is. Just write it down. At least write it down occasionally. You know, you don't have to be obsessive about it and write down every single detail every single time that you work out, but periodically you should write down what you actually do so that you can come back to it and see, well, let's try and do that same workout again and see if I can do better and feel, stronger and have better endurance and feel less winded. If so, then you've made progress, but you need to write it down at least occasionally to know that you're doing the right things and making progress. So now that we understand the basic framework of forming goals, establishing your baseline, and then training to meet those goals and retesting later, let's see about how to actually focus on the training itself. So when you're training, I think the constant art of training is trying to challenge yourself enough that you make progress, but not so much that you get injured. Now, we could make this really, really complicated for you, or we could make it really simple. And I think if you understand just 3 basic ideas, then I think you'll be fine in creating your own exercise program. So the first thing is called rating of perceived exertion. Now, there are lots of different kinds of rating scales, and some are 1 to 20, some are 1 to 10. One of them is called an RIR. I actually have videos on these things if you want to know more details, but I think if you just generally think about it this way, all right, we've got an RPE, rating of perceived exertion, and all that is a scale of 1 to 10, and we want to know, how difficult was your exercise? How hard was it? Do you feel like you were giving 100% effort, meaning you actually failed in the middle of exercise because it was so difficult? Or was it little to no effort at all? And generally speaking, if you try to aim for an RPE of about 6 to 8, sometimes challenging yourself to that 9 where you almost fail but not quite, then I think you're going to be challenging yourself hard enough that you will make progress. But let's not go to an RPE of 10. So we do not need to train to failure. You don't need to literally give 100%. Although once in a blue moon, once every couple of months, if you do something where you literally fail in the middle of it, it is kind of a nice feeling, almost mentally more than anything. But you don't have to do it to make progress for your health. If it's fun once in a while to train to failure, that's okay, but it does increase your risk of getting injured, so try to keep it to a minimum. And then if we understand what we call the 10% rule, which is just to say that in terms of regression and progression, in other words, making an exercise more difficult or less difficult, that if we add basically 10% intensity or 10% difficulty per week, then we probably are challenging ourselves enough that we're going to get strong, but we're not overdoing it where we risk getting injured. So let's say that you were able to run for 10 minutes at a time and you were able to do that on a consistent basis. Then maybe next week try to run for 11 minutes. You don't need to push it all of a sudden to 15 minutes because you'll probably hurt yourself because it's a little bit too much to be adding too quickly. And I think that's the main reason people get injured, is they just do too much too quick and their body is not ready for it yet. So no more than 10% per week. And you don't have to add anything week by week. Just don't do more than 10% per week. And another way of looking at this is with the OPT model. This comes from NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. That's where I did my personal training certification. So even after all of my doctoral training and master's training and subsequent, seminars and things like that, I still look at this as a pretty good model. It's not perfect and I would make some slight changes, but I think if you understand this model, it's a really good framework that if you don't understand anything else, you really don't need to make it more complicated. This will get you by. So we just look at it this way: stabilization first. We need to first establish good movement patterns and make sure we're, coordinated, that we're moving in a somewhat graceful manner, that we have good motor control and stabilization. Then we can start to add some strength. We can start to add some difficulty to exercises, pick up heavier weights, for example, or run more quickly or do things that are just more dynamic in general. But all of this, really, stabilization and strength, this is going to take a long, long time, like months and months, really, before you can get to what we truly consider power. Power in the exercise science world means moving heavy weight as fast as you possibly can, which means, as you might expect, it's very dangerous if you aren't prepared for it. It's really important to train, but you really need to slowly work your way up to it. So wherever you're at, it's really good to start with stabilization. So that would be like high reps and low weight, and just get your heart going, get the blood flowing, and get good movement coordination. Then we can add some weight onto it, some resistance, make things more difficult and dynamic, and that's going to challenge the body and start to really add some bone mass, muscle mass, strengthen your tendons and your ligaments, and challenge your nervous system a little bit more. But physically, it's just going to make your human body a little bit tougher, so you're probably harder, it's harder to get injured because your body is just tougher. And the very last thing you want to do is add power to the mix, which is maximum speed and maximum weight at the same time. That would be something like a clean or a snatch. Those are very, very difficult exercises, and you just don't want to be jumping into them too fast. Quick note, you can download my notes if you'd like to, if you're a member, and you can be a member on my website for as little as $5 a month, and you get special members only resources. Lastly, let's talk about the FITT principle. And by the way, notice that there's a little E in parentheses here, and that's for enjoyment. And that's because generally speaking in textbooks, you'll see it written like this, FITT. But here's a paper that I'm referencing right here that challenges this idea and thinks that we should add one more principle to this FITT principle, and that is E for enjoyment. So normally, if you're trying to understand how much exercise you should do, how intense it should be, and what kind of exercise you should do, then we're going to use the FITT principle. And all that stands for is frequency, intensity, timing, and type. Frequency is how many days per week. Intensity is how difficult the exercise is. So earlier we talked about rating of perceived exertion. So basically, what's your RPE for the exercise? How difficult should it be? Timing is either the actual time that you spend exercising, or we're talking about how many sets and repetitions of a strength exercise you should do. Type simply describes, well, the type of exercise. Should it be more endurance focused, strength focused, full body? Should you use weights, etc., etc. And then lastly is this reference here. Again, read the article if you like, but basically enjoyment. You should not just consider all of these factors, but also try to do something that you enjoy at a pace that you enjoy it, as many days a week as you enjoy it, for as long as and as intense as you enjoy. So if you're not enjoying your exercise at all, then maybe we can start to tweak things. And there's always some wiggle room there. That's it for part 2. Next time we'll be talking about specific FITT protocols for cardio, stabilization, endurance, strength, hypertrophy, and power. And so we'll look at frequency, intensity, timing, and type for each of those variables to give you a specific framework that you can use if you're trying to get started on planning your own exercises. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications so that you actually get notified when I release part 3. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.